Good evening. Welcome to the educational system as we know it today, and we are taking a look at the John F. Kennedy assassination some many years later. Took place in November of 1963. This is for extra credit in History 122, and you will find the information that you need on the D2L page. I've got a work page. That's where you may take notes. And then, excuse me, on the note page, you'll write your top 5, 6, or 7 suspects in the case of the century, case of the past century. And I also have a page on the D2L, the top John F. Kennedy assassination theories, and you may refer to that. I also have included a printout of G. Robert Blakey of Notre Dame and his theory on what happened. So let's begin, and if you got your pen ready, pencil ready, and then the object is for you to figure out who did the deed, who killed John F. Kennedy. And this is a 2-page paper, handwritten, and then please mail those pages to me, Professor Steve Hoffbeck, at the address on that take-home page with your take-home quiz, or you could email me for the mailing address. So you can mail it back in with that package that you already have for the take-home quiz on the reading on the book, or you could use a separate envelope, and that would just be regular U.S. postage. So let's take a look at John F. Kennedy and the big story. And so you take a look at the death of John F. Kennedy many years later. And some say that this was a moment that changed America, and you can see somebody's in the crosshairs in this photo. But the interesting aspect of all of this is that the information was going to be released to the public in 2017. And after a few interesting revelations, then it got cut off. And so the current President Donald Trump, had written to the American people. As I explained in the certification in 2017, the American people expect their government to provide as much access as possible to the John F. Kennedy assassination records so that they may, as they deserve, finally be fully informed about all aspects of this pivotal event. However, over the past 180 days, executive departments and agencies have reviewed all of the information within the records temporarily withheld from release and have proposed to the Archivist of the United States that certain information should continue to be redacted, in other words, blacked out, because of identifiable national security, law enforcement, and foreign affairs concerns. And the President agreed with the Archivist's recommendations that the continued withholdings are necessary to protect against identifiable harm to national security, law enforcement, or foreign affairs. The other one said and. But it is of such gravity, it is so important that it outweighs the public interest. And so the big question from this memorandum issued in 2018 is, what would be so terrible that it outweighs the public interest, your need to know what happened? So that's a big question for you to try to figure out. So the records would be withheld from full public disclosure until no later than October 26, 2021. But that is at the discretion of the President in 2021. So we shall see. But what does it mean? It's of such gravity it outweighs the public interest. Well, let's take a look. What could be that terrible so that people should not know it? And so on the one page, you can write what you think. That's on the 5 main JFK theories. That was from 2019. So what are the 2 things that would be so terrible that people could not know it? That would be one of the bases of what you're looking at. And with John F. Kennedy, he was Time Man of the Year for the year 1961 when he first took office. It's a terrible painting of him. But when we take a look at John F. Kennedy, there is the dark side of John F. Kennedy. And the book by Seymour Hersh looked at John F. Kennedy and said he was not a bright and shining star. There were quite a few problems with the man. And so in the November 1960 election, John F. Kennedy ran for president, and Lyndon B. Johnson, the #1 competitor for that nomination in the Democratic Party, was the vice president. And so watch out with your vice president. Make sure that he does not want to become president in the worst way. And so John F. Kennedy spoke idealistically, let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike, that the torch has passed to a new generation of Americans. And so for John F. Kennedy, he had problems, particularly in Cuba. And so the world came its closest to nuclear war back in October of 1962, 1 year before he was assassinated. Some of the players that we see here, Fidel Castro, the leader of communistic Cuba, and Nikita Khrushchev, cool first name, mean last name, mean guy, leader of the USSR, or Russia as we would call it these days. And so the big question is asked, how good of a president was he? Well, some say he was good at foreign affairs. And regarding foreign affairs, he was hanging around with Ellen Romech from East Germany. And East Germany was communistic at the time. He was hanging around with Marilyn Monroe, the Hollywood actress. And so the apple maybe did not fall very far from the tree because his father had been hanging around with Gloria Swanson back in the 1920s, a Hollywood film actor as well. And John F. Kennedy also had been hanging around with Mimi Alford, a White House intern. That's not very nice. And then he also would hang around with Judith Campbell Exner, who was the girlfriend of Johnny Rosselli, a mobster figure from Chicago and Los Angeles. So his legacy is muddied from the past, from what we thought at the time. But let's take a look at the known truth, and you may follow along in your notes on that note page. The known truth is that on November the 22nd, 1963, at 12:30 in the afternoon, John F. Kennedy was killed. He was hit by 2 rifle bullets, and the question is how many bullets missed. We'll take a look at this. With the assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, was he the lone assassin? That's what you're going to figure out. Was he an assassin with a conspiracy where people hired him to do the job or assisted him in doing the job of assassination? And when he had a chance, on the Saturday just after the Friday assassination, there were TV reporters in a hallway, radio reporters as well, and he said, I don't know what this is all about. He said, I'm just a patsy, which means set up. Now, he's either a very, very clever liar and cool and calm under pressure, or he's telling the truth. It's a 50-50 proposition. However, if Lee Harvey Oswald alone did the deed, then what is to be kept hidden until the year 2021? That's a big question. If it was not Lee Harvey Oswald alone, then who were the conspirators? That's what the public probably can't handle at this point. And so, Lee Harvey Oswald, experts agree that he was the assassin. And so, what are the possibilities? Either he was basically not the assassin, or if he was a shooter, then someone helped him, and who is the big question? If he alone did the deed, there's no reason to conceal that fact, as I just said. So what is so terrible, shocking, or dangerous that it cannot be known until October 26, 2021, or maybe not even then? Let's take a look at the top 5 theories. This would be a new top 5 theories page. And so, number 1 on the list, as you take a look at it, would be, shockingly, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the Vice President of the United States. This would mean that it was a coup d'etat. And for Lyndon Baines Johnson, there were rumors in Washington, D.C., and it was actually published in newspapers such as the Los Angeles Times. We can look that up. But Johnson was going to be dumped by John F. Kennedy as vice president in 1964. And so if he's dumped as vice president, can he ever become president of the United States? That's a good question. So it might be Lyndon B. Johnson and the FBI director J. Edgar Hoover. And with J. Edgar Hoover, there was a mandatory retirement age, and so J. Edgar Hoover was going to be replaced, but then he was not replaced because there was a different president. And so this is the view of law enforcement would be hurt if you could not trust the FBI. The second big theory would be that the mob, the MAFIA, had done the deed, because the Kennedy brothers had made a deal whereby the mob would turn out the vote in Chicago. And the mobsters thought that the Kennedy brothers, John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert F. Kennedy, would take it easy on organized crime. However, Robert F. Kennedy thoroughly investigated the mobsters and was putting people behind bars. And so, one of the theories of investigative reporter Jack Anderson is that it was the mob. We skipped ahead there just a little bit. Okay. According to Jack Anderson, supreme investigative reporter from that time period. And so the mob killed John F. Kennedy and then silenced Lee Harvey Oswald to put an end to that story. And when we take a look at what was released in 2017, this is an FBI bit of information. It came out sometime later that a fellow, an informant for the FBI or for the Dallas Police Department, Vander Slice, discussed his knowledge of Jack Ruby. Vander Slice told the FBI people that on the morning of the assassination, Jack Ruby called him on the telephone and asked him if he would like to go to the presidential parade in Dallas with him and if he would like to watch the fireworks. Vander Slice said that he was with Jack Ruby and standing at the corner of the Postal Annex building facing the Texas School Book Depository building, which is where the shooting took place, at the time of the shooting. Immediately after the shooting, Ruby left and headed towards the area of the Dallas Morning News building without saying anything to him. So that's one of the things that had been covered up for the longest time. And then there would be information that came out in 2017 in the month before John F. Kennedy died. One copy of this report is furnished to the Dallas Division for Information. They were conducting inquiries to locate Lee Harvey Oswald 1 month before the assassination, and they were going to find if Oswald has relocated in the Dallas territory, which is interesting to take a look at. And so there was an FBI agent, Agent James Hosty, based in Dallas. And for the agent, after the assassination, he had orders to flush down the toilet a note that Lee Harvey Oswald had delivered to Agent James Hosty's office. And as we take a look at the information, in 1975, the Justice Department decided that they would not prosecute the FBI agent James Hosty. And this is what was in the note according to the New York Times in 1975. According to Mr. Adams, some days before the assassination, Oswald left with the receptionist at the Dallas FBI office a note addressed to Agent Hosty. The receptionist, he said, recalled that the note contained a threat to blow up the FBI, headquarters there in Dallas, and the Dallas Police Department if the agent did not stop trying to interview Oswald's Russian-born wife, Marina. So, would you take it seriously if a fellow that Hosty had been trying to contact and had missed him 2 times, that he says, oh, I'm going to blow up the FBI building and the Dallas Police Department building as well? The third theory that I want you to write down is potentially the CIA. And you wonder, why would the CIA do such a thing? Well, in the Bay of Pigs disaster in April of 1961, John F. Kennedy said, I'm responsible for this disaster, the failure to have a successful invasion of Cuba by Cuban exiles. But John F. Kennedy fired the CIA director, Allen Dulles, and the number 2 man, Richard Bissell. And then who turned up on the Warren Commission investigating the assassination? None other than Allen Dulles, to make sure of what kind of information was going to be presented at that time. And so, when you take a look at the filmmaker Oliver Stone, who made his film way back in the 1990s, and there is a biography of a CIA agent, Angleton, written by Jeff Morley, and he is the editor of JFK Facts Online. He explains Oswald would be a marked card, a soldier or pawn, to be used as needed in case they needed to pin this upon someone. So that's filmmaker Oliver Stone. And the oddest thing about Lee Harvey Oswald, he defected to Russia in 1959, and the picture on the left is supposedly Lee Harvey Oswald. He came from Fort Worth, Texas at the time, and in 1959, in newspapers across the country, his name became well known. His brother is shown on the right side of the picture. His brother also lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But also there's a theory that Fidel Castro, the leader of communistic Cuba, could perhaps have sent a hitman out to kill John F. Kennedy because the CIA had sent hitmen out to kill Fidel Castro. The CIA, in fact, hired mobsters to kill Castro. So, maybe Castro did the deed at that time. Castro is now dead. He lived 1926 to 2016. He outlived numerous American presidents. So why would we conceal the fact that Fidel Castro was behind it if he's dead already, is my big question. Theory number 5 is that the Russians wanted to get rid of John F. Kennedy. Remember, always blame Russia for everything that happens. And if it was Russia, that would certainly harm foreign affairs if they killed a president of the United States. So, we take a look at the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And I figured that, generally speaking, individuals who were involved wanted to tell the truth about what happened to John F. Kennedy and Lee Harvey Oswald before these individuals died. So let's take a look at the people involved. We take a look at Jesse Curry, the retired Dallas, Texas police chief. He kept files and he published them in this book. I got a hold of the book. It cost me like $70. But what did he put in it? And so the President of the United States was coming to Dallas, Texas on November the 22nd of 1963. And so the Dallas Police Department had to carry out plans laid out by Winston Lawson, the Secret Service representative from Washington, D.C. Lawson advised the Dallas Police Department should have police officers on each railroad and traffic overpass. There were 2 to 4 men assigned to each one. And when you take a look at the Kennedy assassination as well, you take a look at the presidential limousine. There is a plexiglass bubble that could fit over the top, but it was warm in Dallas that day, and so the plexiglass top was not put on the presidential convertible. But that plexiglass top was not bulletproof anyway. However, it could have maybe deflected the bullet to a certain degree. And so you see the Secret Service agent for Jackie Kennedy sitting on that jump seat on the back of the limousine. John F. Kennedy said he did not want to have his Secret Service agent ride on the opposite side. But every time that the limousine would slow down, then the Secret Service agent from the car in back would trot forward and assume his position in case he needed to step into action. And so here you can see again the presidential limousine from the LBJ library. Here you can see another photo. You can see that there also was a motorcycle policeman immediately beside the John F. Kennedy limousine. Jackie Kennedy is seated right beside John F. Kennedy. Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie are sitting in a jump seat, and then there's a driver who is a Secret Service agent, and then there's another Secret Service agent seated in the front seat. And so Jesse Curry wanted to let the world know that he saw a few unauthorized people on the overpass in front of the limousine at the time when John F. Kennedy was shot. And Jesse Curry wondered, how in the world did they ever get up there? Well, there also would be information in his book that the FBI had complete files on many possible conspirators who might have something against the president. Agent James Husty was investigating Oswald at that time, as we've said previously. And had these FBI files been available to the Dallas Police Department, these individuals would have been placed under surveillance. So the assassination never would have happened if it was Lee Harvey Oswald. But how Oswald remained entirely unnoticed by law enforcement agencies is still a matter of controversy. You see how he kind of walks carefully through all of that. And with the assassination of John F. Kennedy, there was a shot that hit John F. Kennedy. It was the second shot fired. And here's a picture by an Associated Press photographer, and it shows that John F. Kennedy has been hit, and he's grasping at his neck or throat area. And some of the agents are busy looking back. And there is an agent ready to move forward to the limousine at that point. And he will only run up there after that shot. But with this AP photo, John F. Kennedy had already been hit. And this Dallas police chief, Jesse Curry, he asked the question, how was the president hit this early if the tree in the background blocks the view from the window? This is the Dallas police chief. He knows this area. And so that week there were tributes put to John F. Kennedy, and you can see the location of the tree right beside the building. And here you can see how there's a certain point where the tree would block a shooter from that 6-story window. However, there's a man standing in the doorway, and many have said that the man closely resembles Lee Harvey Oswald. Is it possible the man in the doorway is Lee Harvey Oswald? And so here's the picture. You can see a man who is dressed like Lee Harvey Oswald was dressed that day, in a t-shirt and kind of a plaid shirt, I guess. And with the Warren Commission, they attempted to prove that the man was Billy Lovelady, who also worked in that depository. Supposedly it was like Twin Day that you have at homecoming or your snow festival, whatever, in high school. But also, Jesse Curry included the paraffin test, which is in the Warren Commission report. Okay, during the course of the interrogation of Lee Harvey Oswald, there was a paraffin test that's using wax. It was performed by the Dallas police on both of his hands and on his right cheek on his face. The paraffin test of Oswald's hands reacted positively to the test, but the cast on his face showed no reaction. And so Oswald, he had a nitrate pattern on his hand consistent with an allegation that he fired a revolver which killed a police officer, J.D. Tippit, about an hour after the assassination. But the test taken of the right side of his face did not reveal any nitrates from having fired a rifle, thus offering no proof that Lee Harvey Oswald had recently fired a rifle. And then the emergency room physician, Dr. Perry, examined the throat wound, and the doctor there in Dallas, he assessed it as an entrance wound, which would mean that John F. Kennedy had been shot from the front because he was facing the other direction. And this man was no amateur at assessing wounds. He stated he had previously treated from 150 to 200 gunshot wounds. The Warren Commission tried desperately to indicate that this wound was an exit wound, not an entrance wound. But at the time, Dr. Perry insisted the president was shot from the front. Also, Officer W.E. Barnett, he said, when the shots were fired, I looked up and could not see anyone or anything extending out of the windows. I thought the shots were coming from the top of the building. He was located in that Dealey Plaza. Officer J.M. Smith in the middle of Elm Street said, I heard the shots and thought they were coming from bushes of the overpass. These are police officers. And then we take a look at the .38 caliber revolver of Lee Harvey Oswald. This is from the National Archives and Records Administration. So he's got a revolver, .38 caliber revolver. It has 6 bullets that can be in the chamber. The key element is, what does he do with that .38 caliber revolver? And with Lee Harvey Oswald, the CIA knew that Lee Harvey Oswald, 2 months before the assassination, in September of 1963, went to the Russian embassy in Mexico City, Mexico. And he said, and this is recorded on tape, I'm afraid they'll kill me. Let me in, he said, speaking of KGB, Russian secret agency officers. And when you take a look at him, bear in mind, Lee Harvey Oswald and his wife Marina had 2 daughters. One was aged 21 months, one was 5 weeks old. And Lee Harvey Oswald, holding his .38 caliber revolver, he said, see, this is what I must now carry to protect my life. And then after John F. Kennedy was shot, why did he go to his rooming house? He was not at the house with his wife at this time. They had some argument or whatever. But why would he go to the rooming house to get his .38 caliber revolver? If he was going to assassinate somebody that day, why did he not bring the .38 caliber revolver along with him? So why would he then, after shooting Officer J.D. Tippit, leave 4 spent shell casings there? These are from the Tippit crime scene. And so he examined these .38 special caliber cartridges. This is from the National Archives. And then there were 4 .38 special cartridges found in his revolver at the time of his arrest. And then you can see the difference with those found in his pocket. These are the ones in his revolver. These are the ones in his pocket. So why do they look different? And you can see by the size, these are definitely longer than these because it's an inch and an inch on both photos. And so these are from the Tippit crime scene. They match those in his pocket, but they don't match those in his revolver. How do you explain that? Nobody bothers to explain it. Nobody even asks the question. But also, after the assassination, there was a phone call between Lyndon B. Johnson, who quickly became President of the United States, and J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, who said, I just wanted to let you know of a development which I think is very important in connection with this case. This man in Dallas, we of course charge him with the murder of the president. The evidence that they have at the present time is not very strong. That's from the LBJ library transcription. But also, let's add up the bullet remnants that are found in the JFK limousine. And bear in mind, JFK limousine has been destroyed. You can't go to check it, which is probably convenient. But this is the windshield. Some bullet hit the windshield. And I'd like people to explain which bullet hit the windshield exactly. And then this would be the lead from a broken bullet found in the front of the limousine, probably underneath the windshield. And this is more lead found in the limo. So there's quite a bit of shrapnel. And the question is that from one bullet? And with Jackie Kennedy, she died in 1994. And she gave only 2 personal interviews in the years after the assassination. And one was to be locked up until the 1990s. One was to be locked up until 100 years after she gave the interview, which would be in the year 2067. But people ask Jackie, why did you not change your code that day? She said, let them see what they've done. I want them to see. There was a witness there that day in the limousine. Her name was Nellie Connolly, the wife of the governor of Texas. And she said, the first shot missed. The second shot hit John F. Kennedy's upper back. A third bullet hit John Connolly, and a fourth bullet hit the skull of John F. Kennedy. So she says it was 4 shots fired. And here's another bit of lead fragments found in Connolly's wrist. And some of my sources say that the wrist bone is among the hardest bones in the human body, as far as that was partly where the bullet went through. However, there was the so-called magic bullet, found in almost pristine shape. It's got a few marks on the front, but it looks like it had been fired into a cotton wad and then placed in this area of John F. Kennedy. So this is from the National Archives. This is what the bullet looks like. So perhaps it went through John F. Kennedy and Governor Connolly and came out in that condition. By phone, Lyndon B. Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover talked about it. Hoover said, we have the gun and we have the bullet. There was only one full bullet that was found on the stretcher that the president was on at the hospital. It apparently had fallen out when they massaged his heart. We have that one. And he's saying that it was in his body. We have what we call slivers, which are not very valuable in the identification. So exactly how many bullets were there? Nellie Connolly, when people say, oh, the one bullet hit John F. Kennedy, then hit John Connolly, she always says, I was there, they weren't. When they argue with me, all I have to say is, were you in that car that day? Also, we take a look at the man John Tonheim, the judge who looked at all the records in the assassination files of John F. Kennedy. And he said there's a major problem with a fellow named Jack Ruby. Because Jack Ruby was the one who killed Lee Harvey Oswald on the Sunday morning in the basement of the Dallas police headquarters, when there were guards at every door. No one was supposed to be let in, but somehow he just walked in and with one bullet killed Lee Harvey Oswald on that Sunday after the assassination on Friday. And the FBI files include witnesses who said they saw Oswald and Ruby together meeting in the weeks before the assassination. Well, the FBI wasn't able to prove that. Oswald was dead. Ruby did not say anything. And so we take a look at some of the documents that had been blacked out. And this comes from the Organization of American Historians newsletters. It's very authentic. And it shows what had previously been blocked out, and then it was released. And so what was the information that had been released quite some time ago, back in the 1990s? This is what it said. Our source added that in the instructions from Moscow was indicated that now the KGB, the Russian police agency, was in possession of data purporting to indicate President Lyndon B. Johnson was responsible for the assassination of late President John F. Kennedy. So you understand why that was not released until the 1990s. But it's just purporting at that time. And when then we take a look at Lyndon B. Johnson, who was inaugurated as president, taking the oath of office. He made sure that Jackie Kennedy was with them on Air Force One. They also put the coffin of the president in there rather than have an autopsy in Dallas. They were taking it to D.C. for perhaps a better autopsy of the dead president. And so this was declassified in 1992. Memorandum for Mr. Johnson, furnished by the FBI. And then it says at the bottom, Lee Harvey Oswald arrested in connection with killing of the Dallas policeman. No direct link with the assassination. Reported to be refusing to answer questions. Also, we take a look at the story of Evelyn Lincoln. She is a witness from the time. She was the secretary for John F. Kennedy, and she wrote a book, she published a book, and she wanted to tell what happened before she died in 1995. And so what was in her book? This is on page 205. She asked the president, who is your choice as a running mate in the 1964 election? And John F. Kennedy replied, at this time I'm thinking about Governor Terry Sanford of North Carolina, but it will not be Lyndon Johnson. This news was not shocking to Evelyn Lincoln at the time. We also take a look at the assassination of the assassin. And so here you can see it, that Jack Ruby was walking right up to the assassin as they were going to put Lee Harvey Oswald into a car, not into an armored car, and there was a policeman on the side who was handcuffed to him. But notice very carefully that nobody is standing in front of Lee Harvey Oswald. Nobody would want that job at that time. And so, Jack Ruby, why does he kill the assassin? Well, some say he was just so emotionally upset. He wanted to defend Jackie Kennedy somehow and get this rat who killed the president. But with Jack Ruby, he's really a perfect assassin because you can't really execute him very well because he's going to die from lung cancer. He died in 1967, which by the time you got a trial in 1964, 1965, it's just a couple of years later that he died. There's another witness as well who wanted to testify as to the sloppiness of the Secret Service in Dallas on that day. His name was Abraham Bolden, and in 2009, this first African-American Secret Service agent wrote about what had happened in Dallas in that time period from what he knew. And for Abraham Bolden, he said that some of the Secret Service officers had gotten drunk the night before the assassination, and they had and somebody probably, he said, had stolen their badges, which would mean that the Secret Service could gain access, or these people pretending to be Secret Service men could get access to wherever they wanted to go. But also, much of the truth of John F. Kennedy is told about in The Dark Side of Camelot, a 1997 Seymour Hersh. But also, there would be a lawyer in the Justice Department. His name was Ronald Goldfarb, and he published a book as well. And these were his conclusions. And bear in mind, he was investigating mobsters in the Louisville, Kentucky area, in the area around Cincinnati as well. And he writes that the top mob members wanted Robert Kennedy and later John Kennedy murdered. So at first they wanted to get rid of the Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. And when you take a look at the report of the Select Committee on Assassinations, this is from, it's published in 1979, but comes out in the 1970s. And the committee believed on the basis of evidence available to it that President John F. Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. They are unable to identify the other gunmen or the extent of the conspiracy. And with G. Robert Blakey, head of the Notre Dame Center for the Investigation of Organized Crime, this is what he said on a PBS documentary. He said, if the mob had a hand in the president's death, and I think they did, and they induced Oswald to kill the president, it was terribly important that he be silenced, because eventually Oswald, if alive, would testify as to who his associates were, or they ran the risk that he would. And therefore, there's every indication that Ruby stalked and killed Oswald in an effort to silence him. And when we take a look at the various information that I've collected from time to time, the New York Times, 1964, in a Ruby trial, Sergeant Dean, who helped arrest Jack Ruby, had spoken of what happened, what Jack Ruby said to him, that Dean got in trouble because he spoke perjured, harmful, prejudiced, inadmissible, and inflammatory testimony. When he said Ruby told him 10 minutes after the shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald that Ruby had planned for 2 days to kill Oswald, Kennedy's accused assassin. G. Robert Blakey also said, Carlos Marcello talked about getting a stone out of my shoe in Sicilian, talking about getting a nut to kill not Bobby Kennedy was his nemesis, but John Kennedy was the man behind the nemesis. And as Santo Trafficante, head of the mob formerly in Cuba, he got pushed out of Cuba by Castro in the area of 1959. In fact, he was put in prison. He died in 1987. But Trafficante, on his deathbed, muttered, we shouldn't have killed Giovanni, that means John. We should have killed Bobby, is what he said. And with Jack Ruby, he never talked. He said, everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, what were his motives. That's what he did say at the time. And so the key element will be there's no one in front of Lee Harvey Oswald when Jack Ruby steps forward. It means that some policeman at one of the doors allowed Jack Ruby to get in. That's a terrible thing. But also, there was no agent who was going to shield John F. Kennedy at the time because they had sped up after they had just gone around the corner, and they sped up so there would be no agent there on the back until after the assassination. And so when we take a look at the story, I want you to remember what William Paley, the man who founded CBS News, once said. Propaganda isn't what you tell people, it's what you don't tell them. And so I'm trying to tell you what others do not tell you. And so, for the baby boomer generation of which I am a part, I was age 10 in November of 1963, the age at which historical consciousness comes into a young person's brain. And so I have images in my brain still of the beautiful widow, Jackie Kennedy, accompanied by Caroline, their daughter, and John, that's John F. Kennedy Jr., just over 2 years old. And then Robert F. Kennedy, his wife, Ethel, as well. And so Jackie Kennedy, at one point, puts a flag upon her husband's coffin and kisses the flag on the coffin. And with the vital documents at the time of the Warren Commission in the 1960s, they were to be locked up until the year 2029. But due to the efforts of Bill Clinton and the members of Congress in the 1990s, it was hastened forward, and so that the time was changed to do the math on that. And when we take a look at Robert F. Kennedy, he fell into a deep depression after the assassination of his brother. It's sort of like he felt he had made a major mistake with the war on crime, perhaps. And in some sources it says he thought that the mob had done it. But John F. Kennedy was also assassinated in the year 1968. For Jackie Kennedy, she gave an interview with JFK biographer William Manchester that information is to be locked up until the year 2067, 100 years after that interview. What was in the interview is what I would like to know. And for Bill Clinton, President of the United States, 1992 all the way through to the year 2000, he had been such a bright young man from Arkansas, and he met John F. Kennedy in 1963. And he wanted to be a president just like John F. Kennedy, and in some ways he certainly was. But he helped provide for the opening of these assassination files. So in 1992, the records were to be opened by 2017, and was certified as justifiably closed. And so you see other individuals try to muddy the waters. Who was the real target? Some say, oh, it was actually John Connally. But maybe there were a whole lot of bullets that came on that day. Fidel Castro, he lived for a long, long time after 1963. With the mob, only after the death of J. Edgar Hoover, a new FBI director was appointed, was there a major crackdown upon the mobsters with the RICO, the Racketeering Act, which came later on. But also we're going to see for President Lyndon B. Johnson, he went on to bring the United States into the war in Vietnam, and strangely in 1968, he said, I shall not seek nor shall I accept the nomination of my party for the presidency. And with John F. Kennedy, there's an image of little John F. Kennedy Jr. saluting his father's coffin because there was no school on that Monday, the day of the funeral. It was so sad back in the time period. So what are the legacies of that time period? Yeah. With the Kennedy family, it could have been that Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., the father, here you can see him on the left, that he wanted one of his sons to be president of the United States. He was denied the opportunity way back in 1940. There are some individuals who believe that all the Kennedy brothers could have been a royal family. It could have been John F. Kennedy, then Robert F. Kennedy, and then Edward Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, as we would call him. So I want you to put on your thinking hat and try to figure out who did the deed as we go way back to the beginning of all of this, and why everything is going to be hidden until that year 2021, and will the president even at that time? And so what was so terrible? How many bullets were there that day? So I want you to write what you think. Was it Lee Harvey Oswald alone, which does not seem to be the case, because if it was, then what are you not releasing until year 2021? So it could be not Lee Harvey Oswald. If these are mobsters, they send two assassins, two hitmen, to make sure that one makes sure that the other one does the deed. And perhaps one was supposed to kill Lee Harvey Oswald as well. Or could it be Lyndon B. Johnson and the FBI director and the mobsters, or any combination thereof? So, put in your thinking hat. Please write this out by hand. Who you think did the deed, who did the job, and then please send that to me. It's at my my home address, which is listed on that page with the take-home quiz. Okay, so check out D2L. Take a look at the video. You may stop it at any time. It's on my own personal YouTube channel. And thank you so much for having taken History 122. And thank you for enduring this very, 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 very long video. And have a good night. Thank you.